Hey everybody. So I'm gonna attempt this pink pineapple still life. I'm now gonna move this camera down to the paper and let's get going. So this is an A4 size page and I'm going to use a pencil to start with to sketch the general area where this fruit is gonna be. I don't tend to do the details until much later, so this is how I start. What I do is try to figure out the center point of Okay, so now what I'm gonna do here is concentrating on the dark values of the fruit that I can see by using the pencil. So because this is pretty complex, I squint my eyes quite often. Squinting, closing one eye will help you see the dark shadows primarily where they are. So the image reference actually is slightly different because I took the photo from a slightly different angle. So I'm sorry about that, but I just want you to pay attention to what I'm doing. And every so often you can sort of see where the shadow is. So the leaf on the bottom part, all of that to me is in the shadow. So I just use the pencil and just smudge it a little bit just to get the general value of the shadows. So this is also called unified shadow, where you're going to try and link all the shadows together, all the dark areas together, if you can, if you see it. And that's what I'm focusing on in this sketch. Okay, so I'm still working on the unified shadows, and I feel like there is shadows right in between, like underneath the top primary leaf up here. So that's what I'm trying to get in there. And again, very, very smudgy. Okay, so the next step I'm going to do is try to get a little more detail in about 4 parts. This chunk, this fruit center chunk, and then the top half of this. So what I'd like to do is to try to tackle them chunk by chunk, just so you don't get overwhelmed by the complexity of it, because they all kind of overlap on top of each other, and sometimes they can be overwhelming. So in this attempt, in this painting, I'm going to focus on just values, and that's all. Not going to try and make a masterpiece, not trying to produce a realistic painting, not trying any of that. I am just trying to focus on one problem at a time, or one thing you want to get better at, I guess. So that's what I'm doing here. So the next parts, I'm speeding it up a little bit because it's basically the same. I am applying bit by bit more detail. All right, next I'm now done with the drawing. I'm going to leave the pencil shading here just to give me the idea of those unified shadows, and gonna start painting my underpainting for this one. So I'm gonna use some ultramarine blue. So I'm gonna use blue, and then I'm going to use some yellow to create the green. So first I'm going to just put blue on the leaf area. And what I'm going to do is use the same blue also for the unified shadow. So this is sort of how I'm trying to have them all look unified, including the shadow. First, what I'm attempting to do is the leaf first, even though this whole area here is going to be covered in the same color. So I need to work a little faster because what I want to do is work on wet right here. So as I'm doing this, I'm now gonna add the unified shadow that is underneath. just below the pineapple. So here it sort of comes out this way, and then a little bit back here. So now I'm going to add a bit more water to some of these areas. And quickly go to my yellow. This is lemon yellow. And start adding the yellow right on top of the blue. So the idea with the wet on wet is that it will push the blue down. And create my first green layer. So notice here, when the blue starts to dry, they don't become green anymore. It's more of a yellow on top of the blue. So it's important that the base color remains wet. So right here with my sort of slightly dirty brush, so there's still a bit of yellow in here, I am just re-wetting the top leaf here, so that I can go back in again with the yellow. And yep, I'm gonna work a little faster this time. So every time I do something complicated, I always have to remind myself, and this is basically what I say to myself over and over again. It's not about precision. It's not about trying to get the right color. It's not about trying to make it look real. It's not about any of that. It's more about shadows. It's all about that. So next I'm now going to wet the pineapple area, including the bit that I've covered with the blue, just so I can use the sort of wet on wet tactics on this as well. So if some of you have questions about, well, how do you know it's gonna work? I don't. So this is the process. This is the mindset of during my process. I'm just narrating what's probably going on in my head when I'm doing this. So I'm just wetting it a little bit, but then I noticed that it's starting to bleed, so I'm just taking out that bleeding parts, trying to keep this whole area here wet at the same time. And then I'm now going to go in with a red. So I'm using what would have been called a carmine or pink red, and then I'll mix it with a bit of pyrrole red. So the idea here now is just to bash in the first tone. So I'm not doing this one by one. It's just like the general shape of where the fruit is. And because it's wet on wet, it will sort of lend itself to the spreading. And I noticed that this pinkish color goes all the way down to the stem, just down here, and there's a couple of leaves that are actually pink. So that is what I'm doing. Yeah. Right now, while this is still wet and needed a little bit more time, to settle down, I'm gonna just leave it first. So I'll be back once this is dry. Okay, so it's drying off a little bit, but I'm gonna leave some of this. The paper is really not sized properly, so it's currently buckling, but we're gonna take advantage of it. So I'm just taking some of the wet paint from here and trying to put it in here by dabbing it on, because it will produce blotchiness around the fruit. That would actually be nice. It helps to create the texture that the center of the fruit has anyway. So that's my technique for that. And then you might hear me stalling the speech because I'm still thinking about what I'm going to do. So, but the idea now is to try and fill in the dark shadows all the way around with a purple color. So I'm using a violet mixed with a bit of green. So why do I do that? So because you kind of don't want to have to introduce a color that is completely not related to any of this. So a bit of green or a bit of red in my purple will just tie them all together. So my shadow is sort of like purpley, violety, olivey color. Okay. And no, I'm not sure. Half of the time when I'm doing this, I am not sure it's going to work. So the idea is to just do it anyway. So I'm gonna start here. Do I know where to start? Nope, not really. I just know that I'm gonna try. And the possibilities are endless for mistakes. So assume that, it's not always gonna be successful. But I'm enjoying myself. I find this super relaxing, and that's kind of enough for me right now. So I'm focusing on shadows, and I'm trying as much as possible to unify them if I can, even though it looks like, oh, some of this is separate shadows from the other, but if you actually just squint your eyes a little bit, you can sort of see that they're kind of somewhat connected to each other all the time. So here I will carry on behind, and I'm gonna start filling in the shadows in the back of the fruit as well, and being mindful where I put it, to follow where I put the blue that I did before. So when I avoid some of the green area from the purple, it's a sort of a negative painting technique where you want to actually show off some of that. So as I go into the fruit, I'm gonna be a little less I'm gonna be more careful, because I want the shadow to help me create some of these textures as well. So once again, this is a not sized properly paper. There will be lots of blotchiness and a lot of unevenness. I accept that. This is A4 size moleskin, and it's not sized to a high quality watercolor. So this area here is really wet. So I'm just gonna do my best to put in a little bit of shadows in between. not worry too much if it isn't correct either. So I'm noticing as I go down here, I'm starting to lose some of my intensity of my shadow color because I'm running out. So because I'm running out, the color becomes lighter as I go. So while I am looking at the actual fruit every so often, I'm also trying to follow my own indications of where I'm putting what, where my shadows are going to be, for example. And instinctually, I'm trying to work, if that makes any sense. So my instinct isn't always correct, but it's worked most of the time. So I'm going to trust it, that it will lead me to the